Welcome to the Thought Mesh. We are weaving ideas, inspiring minds. Hi everyone, I'm Prasanna. Some of you might already know me, and for those who don't, I'm a public speaker and someone deeply passionate about technology, data, AI, and meaningful problem solving, though. Through the Thought Mesh, my goal is to explore real world challenges, uncover practical solutions, and bring fresh perspectives from industry leaders to foster a community of shared learning. You can find me more about on my LinkedIn page as below. Yep. So today's topic is something truly close to the heart of modern data works, humanizing data strategy. If I were to say, let's being very honest, right? People can be emotional, unpredictable, and irrational. Yet they are most critical part of any data strategy. So how do we truly put humans at the center of our data efforts? To explore this, I'm joined by someone who is passionate and breathes his philosophy, Chiankai Feng. He's a leader by day, musician. He's a data leader by day, musician by night, and an optimist at heart. Currently, the director of data and AI strategy at ThoughtWorks, and author of Humanizing Data Strategy. He'll be sharing his unique 5C framework: competence, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience, along with some of the actionable examples to help you engage teams, embed empathy and people into your data strategy. So, whether you are a data professional or a leader shaping change, this conversation will shift how you think about data and the people behind it. Welcome, Tiankai. Thank you for taking time, and it's my pleasure to host you today. And to mention, you're one of the first honor of our guest for the Thought Mesh, as it is started in Jan 2025. So, if you
Thank you so
could
very
talk a
much.
little.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, and I'm really happy to be one of the first guests on the Thought Mesh.
Thank you, Tiankai. So, if you would like to talk a little about yourself and what do
Sure,
you do, thought work. So, from there we can start our conversation.
absolutely.
Before you
Yeah,
even present,
yeah,
I have a quite an interesting question about it. But yeah, I did spoke to some people and they wanted to ask it. But I would like to first have your introduction.
sure. I mean, you already gave me a great introduction about myself. That's how I would describe myself as well, right? Being a data leader by day and a musician at night and an optimist at heart. I think that is the one sentence summary of how I am as a person. I worked in data all my career so far. So I started as a marketing analyst, then became a BI analyst and a capability lead, and then a data strategy and data governance lead. And now I'm basically a director for data and AI strategy. And along the way, I always figured out that the human factor of it is the most important and the most difficult one of any data and AI efforts, right? And if we think about it, most of the issues of that happen in data and AI are rooted in human issues, right? Lack of
Yeah,
understanding, lack of communication, not having all the information at hand to make the right decisions, politics, all of that are basically playing on a human field and not so much a technology field. And that is really an important thing to look at. So I thought, let's zoom in on this a little bit more in a practical approach and not just theoretical. And this is how I basically came up with the book as well.
okay, that's glad to hear. So yeah, being in the data domain for a longer time, so that gives you more power and strength and what's happening, right? So a
Hmm.
kind of related to what you mentioned on the BI and multiple other aspects, and we are in the current AI and Gen AI era from that point of view. Think that if you're in a boardroom where AI is pitching itself for the role of a chief data officer,
Hmm.
what will be your first interview question for it? And do you think it would get the job?
That's a great question. I don't think AI would get the job no matter what. I mean, the main thing I would say is, um, because the way I would interview an AI, it would sound like a prompt, right? Because otherwise, a Gen AI would not be able to answer any other way. And
Yeah.
if it's then an answer, it's by definition not really a truly original answer, right? It's probably an aggregation and a summary of different other answers that were given in the past. And it's hard to say that this is really the right point of view, right? It might be very generic, it might be very blurry, but how can we make sure that this fits specifically a certain organization, right? And I feel like data strategy and data management is one of the things where there's a lot of best practices, but you still have to adapt it specifically to the organization that you're in or that you're working with, right? Because you have a specific culture, a specific business model, a specific industry, and that all of that are influencing how you manage data the best way. So yeah, I would say that takes a lot of human empathy and a lot of human understanding to do, right? And it's not easy to capture that with AI.
Very true. Very true. So because AI is all made of your prompts, your data, much of a larger data buckets where you have bunch of informations and just it picks up the right words or it is just looking at what is next coming in. Really appreciate it. So without much ado, so I would make you as the presenter so that we would be able to know more from you on how do you think humanizing the data strategy will add as in the current era of AI moving forward, and what remains as is what is planned to change as we move in this era, and maybe in the next 1 year, 2 year, there's lots of changes. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm making you as a presenter, and I'm looking forward for this very, very interesting conversation after we you complete your presentation. So I'm
Sure.
just moving into the presentation session. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, let's get started then. So, I want to talk to you all today about basically humanizing data strategy, right? Which is the title of my book. And also, it basically is I'm trying to find a balance between like theoretical best practices and practical advice. And I want to give some impulses for sure about how maybe you can adapt what I gave you as food for thought into your practices of data leadership and how that maybe can turn better. We had talked a little bit about introducing myself already. Now, additionally, I would maybe only add that I've also been a TEDx speaker about AI and the human values behind AI. Also, I use my musical talents to sometimes talk about data and sing about data, notably the songs Digital Analytics Anthem or Governors of Data, but also maybe more about that later on. And on a personal level, I'm born and raised in Germany, but my parents are from China. The reason why I'm mentioning that last part, which is a little bit odd, right, in a professional setting, is because it's the one thing that shaped me and my motivations at work as well, right? Being basically of immigrant background in the 80s and being born and raised here made me feel like a outsider a lot of times, right? Basically, I look different than the rest in Germany, right? By default, I'm being treated differently that way too. But not even that, right? Even when I would visit my relatives in China, because of how I think and how I talk, they would immediately notice that something's off about me too, and that I'm not actually from there. So no matter where I was, I felt a little bit like the outsider. But instead of dwelling on that challenge, right, and just feeling bad about it, I channeled it into motivating myself to not let anyone else feel that way and try not everyone else to feel excluded. So all of my efforts basically at work, but also in life, is to make people feel more included and have generally a more inclusive society. And especially in the field of data, right? A lot of things are about including or excluding others, right? Like data literacy, collaboration, making cross-functional decisions. All of that is rooted there. And using that as motivation, that is what drove me also to write the book. And it's also the underlying factor to have empathy and inclusivity as part of any data strategy. That is really the engine that drives humanizing data strategy upfront. So let's do like a quick stage setting, right? Data is more popular than ever, and for better or worse, right? We are having higher speed and more complexity because there are new business models and business processes are constantly changing because of digital transformation. We invested a lot in data literacy and data democratization, meaning that there are more data use cases now that we actually cannot all see anymore if we're not careful enough, right? There's a lot of regulations and laws coming in that are not going to get less, but probably more, right? Like data privacy, ESG, AI, and all of those driving the change. And lastly, of course, there are new technologies and industry trends. We cannot talk about data without talking about AI that are really driving the demand towards data. And all of that leads to the recognition that we need a data strategy that is maximizing the value of data while minimizing the risks. And that means people, process, and technology need to all work together to make it work. And as you noticed, humanizing data strategy really means it's focusing on the people part, right? And this is why also the definition that I like to use for data strategy has a few implications, right? For me, a data strategy is a long-term plan that defines the people, process, and technologies to create, process, and use data to intentionally drive value in a meaningful, secure, and transparent way. And why I like to use that definition is because it implies three things. Number one is that it's about the whole entire data lifecycle, right? It's not only about the analytics and basically use cases at the very end. It's about how data is created and processed in between as well, right? And that means all data stakeholders and all stakeholders that have anything to do with data need to be included in the data strategy. It also implies that it's value driven, right? Because it's about intentionally driving value, which means any data efforts should be strongly aligned with business goals, which often is not the case, where it's driven more by excitement and ideas and not too much by the value itself it generates. And lastly, it's about human perception, right? Which basically means when we talk about what is meaningful, secure, and transparent, we might all have different definitions of what it means, right? But to actually find the right goal together, we need to agree on what it actually means. And that means talking to each other, making decisions together, having an alignment on what things mean. And only that is then the way forward to actually make a data strategy successful. So, what are the 5 C's that we talk about, right? Prasanna already had mentioned them before, but let's dive a little bit deeper into them, right? The 5 C's for me that are about humanizing data strategy are as follows. There's competence, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience. Competence is really about the knowledge and the skill set itself, right? So really about knowledge about business, data, and technologies, and using intrinsic motivation of growth and human connection to really drive that aspect. Collaboration is about the inter and cross-functional collaboration through transparency, accountability, shared goals, and co-creation, and really having the right effective way of working together, right? Communication means putting the audience first and using narrative structures that are specific to the different audiences that you have, and that you can basically make the business value and personal reward undeniable through continuous impulses. Creativity is really, for me, the human basis for organizational innovation, which means there are different types of creativity, but it's about also creating the right environment for creativity to actually drive innovation in a better way. And then lastly, conscience, which is about critical thinking and human judgment through cross-functional decision-making bodies. Because nowadays, with all of these different regulations and proactive compliance aspects, it's hard for one data team to make all of the choices, right? We need other experts to actually help to make the right choices about it. But let me show you some examples to each of the 5 C's to let you understand maybe a bit more of what it all comes together to. So when we talk about competence, right, let's clean up a little bit the buzzword bingo that we have. And really, it's about here that data driven has become such a buzzword that it implies that all of the companies all become automated data driven machines, right? Which probably shouldn't be the case. And in my view, there's actually a continuum of how much it's experience based and how much is actually data based, right? And if you look at that, basically, if it's more human experience based versus database, then there are 4 different degrees of how you can do it, right? On the one hand side, there's experience based, meaning really it's all about no data being involved. It's fully relying on my own expertise and opinion. Data inspired is that there's no actual direct data that is proving my point or justifying my actions, but I derive it and extrapolate from a different data set that actually can help me make the right decision. Data informed means that it's clear data insights that are specific to the decision that I need to make and the action that I'm taking, that are pairing with my experience itself. And then lastly, you have data driven, which is automated decision making by machines, right? That could be, for example, dynamic pricing on e-commerce websites, where the price is changing according to specific rules, and there's no real human intervention involved anymore. The thing is that not all decisions, if you think about it, can and should be data driven, right? And it's really not about having right or wrong there. It's more about a conscious, intentional, and agreed upon approach. What decisions should become more or less data focused, and for us to do then and do it with intention. And that means we maybe should not always say we want to be data driven, but sometimes it's also just data informed, data inspired, or let's do it with experience. And another aspect of competence, of course, is the topic data literacy. But data literacy is one of the themes where I feel like that it has been a great investment for all the business stakeholders in a company to learn more about data. But nowadays it feels a little bit one-sided, because it also can be interpreted as that the data team noticed that nobody is speaking their language. Now they're just asking all of the rest of the company to learn how to speak the language of data. Until they don't speak it, we don't want to work with them, right? Because they're not literate enough. So we're just sitting back basically and waiting for everyone else to learn our language. Whereas maybe we should also try to understand their language as well, right? And that language should be business expertise or business acumen, right? Really to pair it, what we expect others to learn about data, with us actually learning business domain specific details as well, to really find a way together. And a way how to look at that is that maybe you could actually have domain agnostic, product and domain specific areas like product sales and other domains. And you have a conceptual framework to learn about, but then you have data collection, data management, data evaluation, and data application that are all also domain specific to be learned about. And we can all learn together and find those slots together, right? To actually then speak the same language and collaborate even better across data and business teams. Let's talk about collaboration now, right? In the recent years now, right? We all try to make a transformation a lot from service to self-service, right? Like let's talk about data mesh or data fabric. All of these concepts had in mind scalability, and scalability always implied that we go from a central service, from a central data team, to actually decentralized self-service operating model. And no matter how you took it, though, you always hear about challenges there, right? And the reason why I think those challenges is there is, of course, there's always a trade-off, but also it's a matter of mindset. The word service itself implies a transaction, right? That I'm doing something for you, you give me something in return, and then we're done, the transaction is finished. But what we actually should do, especially when we are in the same company, is that we have a co-creative mindset, right? It's not supposed to be a transaction, it's about us creating something together towards the same goal. And if we can actually have a co-creative mindset, then that implies three things that are really valuable, right? For example, to have shared goals and a shared purpose, to have clear contributions of each of us towards that same shared goal or purpose. And then lastly, all having a strong commitment because we want to co-create together as well. And I'm not saying that the co-creational mindset is a new operating model, right? No matter what operating model you're doing and in what kind of hybrid way you potentially are doing service versus self-service, as long as you can keep co-creation as a mindset, then actually any collaboration should actually get better. And once you actually find that co-creative approach, right, then also it's about how to solve problems. More often than not, especially in like big initiatives like data strategy or data governance, we invest a lot into building that whole framework and like a whole strategic direction first before we even solve problems. But that is often then not popular because senior leaders like to see some kind of return on investment, right? And if you spend a year or two just writing policies and designating theoretical data owner names without actually putting them in action, then that is a very tricky situation to be in, and there's a danger that the program might get stopped, right? Instead, what I like to say is we should think big and start small of solving problems. And to actually solve the right problems, we need to follow the pain, right? Follow the pain means that we actually go for anyone who is struggling with data issues. We find those that are really frustrated with those data issues and acknowledge the data pain points, and we work with them to solve it. And why that works is of two reasons, right? One is that they're actually very eager to work with you, since they already are very frustrated with it, and they are dealing with it probably for a while now, and they really need kind of someone to help solve for them. So they're very eager to work together. And two, they actually have probably created a workaround until now. And so they know exactly how correct looks like too, right? What a solution and the scenario of a solution looks like as well. Which means that you can use those, having clear urgency and clear requirements to then solve the issue, which then leads to advocacy, right? Once the issue is solved, you have a stakeholder group that actually likes to talk about it, how data has helped solve the issue and how it all come together. And once that has happened, right, then the word of mouth actually creates other people that want to tell you about their issues, and you create a whole portfolio of issues you can solve, and then you can build the bigger picture while solving data issues one after another. And that also leads to mindset of success, right? Because if we look at data strategy and data management mindset successes and milestones, they can be very rare, right? That is, for example, data management maturity increasing, or implementing of new guardrails, or a data quality monitoring going live. But all of them, there can be months in between when these things happen. And it's really hard to keep up the morale motivation if you only see success so little in your day to day, right? Meaning we have to shift our mindset here as well, right? Towards seeing success in different ways too, right? So success could also be progress on changing mindsets, efficiency improvements, official commitments, or new ideas. And once you see it that way, then we communicate it that way too. And we are going to infect others by seeing success in different angles too, meaning there can be much more of a continuous success mindset about data management, data strategy as well, to really make it happen. All right. And now it's about communication. So when we talk about communication, the value of data is a very critical part of it all, right? And usually now it's connected to business goals and measurable metrics, right? To really make sure that we can quantify the impact of data as well. But that is for me only addressing the rational side of human beings, right? Because as all of you know, who are working in organizations, you have to kind of agree to your organizational goals, right? But it's not always that they actually excite you. It's not like that a certain net sales goal means a lot of emotional impact for you in your day to day, right? But there are things that we actually care about. Otherwise, we wouldn't have chosen those jobs, right? So finding the balance between organizational and business impact versus personal reward as a way of communicating the value of data really is key. For example, if we talk about higher profitability as a business impact, then higher productivity is like the middle ground between personal impact and business impact. But what it actually means for a few specific individuals in a specific team is that there's less manual efforts, right? They don't have to clean the data manually anymore once per week, for example. Same with new revenue channel, where it's about technology and innovation, but on a personal level, it's about joy experimentation. It's also with legal risk avoided, which is then leading to positive societal impact. And also on a personal level, it's about the moral contribution of human beings. When we talk to people about what the value of data is, let's always keep in mind not only the business impact that should get everyone on board, but also address the personal reward of the individuals that we talk to. And that is different depending on the audience you're talking to, right? The better you understand them, the better you can actually communicate the personal reward as well. And that leads to also storytelling, right? So what actually is the right way of telling the right stories? There's a lot of books and a lot of content out there about how to tell great data stories. But in this context, I really want to just break it down into a simple structure of why, what, and how, right? Why really meaning that we let the audience understand the purpose of it all, right? As we mentioned before on business impact and personal level. That is about the what, meaning that we ensure that decisions and actions are explained in language that the audience understands. And lastly, how, which is co-developing a plan with resources, timeline, deliverables, and committing to the solution. As data professionals, I feel like we're more often excited by the how, and we love to talk about the how, right? Look at all of the great dashboards and codes that I created, look at this great report that I generated, blah, blah, blah. All of that is great. But for someone who doesn't work in data, you completely lose them, right? They have no idea what you're talking about. They are not literate enough to understand it. And they would just like to know why you're doing it. So if we shift our perspective and shift our narrative to always start with the why and then the what and the how, then I think we can get more people on board in an easy way and we're not losing them. Also, when you meet colleagues and stakeholders for the first time, if you don't do it that way from a why, what, and then how, and you start the other way around, then you leave maybe a different first impression that you think, and that is very hard to get out of as well, right? Because you only make a first impression once. So make sure that what you communicate and how you communicate really is in the right way, that people immediately want to talk to you more because they understand how you think and what you're thinking. And then also then addresses stakeholder management itself, right? We have different stakeholders to manage in data, right? There's leadership who are usually sponsoring data efforts. There's collaborators that need to advocate for you. And then you have the team members themselves that need to stay motivated. And all of them need to actually have some kind of advocacy for it for things to move forward. And we all know about stakeholder mapping, I think, right? Where it's just a matter of looking at the level of influence they have. But it can be also structured on different levels that are affecting their characters and their attitude, right? So, for example, we can map our stakeholders by how much they are promoters versus detractors, right? Those that really have great word of mouth about us and those that are generally saying bad things about us. We can also map them across being believers or skeptics, right? For example, believers are people that immediately believe in the new thing and innovation, where the skeptics that are a little bit more skeptical and they need more time to get convinced by more facts. And then you also have thinkers with the stewards, right? Thinkers are people that really love to think deeply and discuss things a lot theoretically, but don't really want to do a lot practically. And you have people that don't want to think at all. They just want to start doing things and maybe realize afterwards that they should have thought a bit more about it and not start doing immediately. And of course, you have everyone in between on those ranges. But mapping of stakeholders on those means you can also and you should also talk to them in different ways, right? You can imagine how it's different to talk to a believer than you talk to a skeptic, or talk to a thinker than you talk to a doer. But doing it in a bit more structured way can prepare you better for the unpredictability based on people's characters, and you can actually use what you know about your characters of the stakeholders to interact with them in a better way. And then it goes to creativity, right? As I mentioned before, there's different levels of creativity for sure. And I like to differentiate between spontaneous creativity and solution-oriented creativity, right? Spontaneous is really usually associated with art, which is really more proactive, right? You have the genius spark all of a sudden of a new idea, and it feels like out of nowhere. And new examples for that could, for example, be that it's new data use cases for collaboration, it's learning and growth opportunities, or it's an unexpected association that you have. But it's also mostly proactive. Solution-oriented creativity is really about solving problems, right? Addressing a problem, thinking about new ideas, how to solve that problem, and then applying it, which means it's also mostly reactive because there has to be a problem first, right? And that means it's optimizing existing processes, it's improving methodologies, or communicating in a different way as before. But to actually apply that both and to actually use it in the right way, actually, we need to create the right environment, right? Picasso once said, the enemy of creativity is common sense. And it's true, especially when I talk to data leaders that encourage to be more creative. They tell me how awkward it feels and how nervous they get to all of a sudden communicate in a different way and show their creativity. But I always keep on saying, right, as long as you don't offend anyone or destroy anything, right, what's the big deal about failing in your ideas, right? Really, it's a thing that's revertible most of the time. So why bother? So that means that we actually start with the right mindset and allow ourselves to create it first. Then we need to create the environment for people to be able to practice their creativity. For example, in team meetings, having brainstorming sessions, etc., etc., and also putting ideas into practical solutions. And then we create habits, right? Once we all can practice it, we have the right environment, then creativity becomes a new default and we all start having new ideas and we can create a habit. But we need to actually proactively do it, right? We need to make people feel safe to be creative to then actually drive innovation in a much more proactive way than before. And that leads me to the last point, conscience, right? There's a lot of issues to think about, but mostly I feel like there are four types of currently burning data concerns that are really key here. Those are data privacy concerns, right? Everything about personally identified information and dealing with it in an ethically right way. Data security concerns, meaning that sensitive information doesn't get into the wrong hands, right? Data ethics concerns, which is about avoiding and preventing disadvantages to specific groups of people, and ungoverned AI, right? Models being trained by fair data and being transparent and explainable altogether is a big challenge. But to solve all of these challenges and to address those, we cannot rely on data teams and data experts themselves only. We need to actually work with the experts together from a legal point of view, from a HR point of view, from a DEI point of view, right? From a information security point of view. All of this means we need to work together to actually make the right decisions so we can then use the right critical thinking and make the right decisions about it. So we move from a reactive compliance process to a proactive ethical process where we don't need to be surprised by new regulations coming in, but we should have addressed it proactively already upfront. All right. And just in closing, then, a few last sentences. Technology should support and not replace humanity. Working on data is not only exciting, it comes with responsibility, and data should be taken seriously, but we can still have fun working with it. The future of data lies in all of our human hands, and good luck to everyone. And before we go into a little bit of a Q&A with Prasanna, let's play one more song that I want to actually show you, where I try to bring the world of data together with the world of music, together with the language of love. So I created a data quality themed love song called Match for Life that I want to show you. So please enjoy.
And I am quite satisfied assessing the status quo. There's not much to improve, and I hope it sustains. My findings are conclusive, let me explain. You are so unique, no one else comes even close. You're the single source of you, no redundancy for sure. You made me complete, didn't know there are things I missed, but you're the single reason that I'm finally fulfilled. My feelings are consistent, consistently increased. In any time or place, you're the only one for me. These words are accurate, I really couldn't lie. Just ask anyone, I talk about you all the time. You came timely into my life, just in time you swooped in and stole my heart. It might make no sense, but it's valid to me. With the rules of love, I'm complying perfectly. My love for you is of highest quality. It's valuable and meaningful, just right for you and me. Our love fits the purpose, I can see it in your eyes. You and me, we are a match for life. We're creating love and consume it every day. We know what is right and I know that you agree. Commitments like a contract we signed with our hearts. Clear sailings of love from the very start. When we have any issues, we always have a talk. Remediate the root cause we hate workarounds. The rules of our love we update it every day. We learn from each other and that's what makes us great. Strategically, tactically and operationally, we manage our love unconditionally. The quality report of our love looks great. All our KPIs achieved 100%. My love for you is of highest quality. It's valuable and meaningful, just right for you and me. Just right for you and me. Our love fits the purpose, I can see it in your eyes. You and me, we are a match for life. You and me, we are a match for life.
All right.
unmute. So that's awesome. So I hope you're able to hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
That's awesome. So you went through with the 5 C's of data strategy, how do we humanize it, and the song was perfect, aligning with what each one of them are looking at. But yeah, there is lots of inputs and data you shared. So people like us, we are in the data side of the business. Every day there is something new coming in, strategy, how do you operationalize it? How do you ensure you deliver the ROI so that the organization comes and puts us into the right spot, and then we are not left alone. So literacy, you spoke about it. So there are lots of different highlightable uh, namings which you had mentioned, and yeah, I would say literally it is lots of data we have to cover through, but really thanks for that. So with that, I know many of them would be keen now to read through the book which you have written, and since I've already read through it, so some questions based on which, so are we good to go?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So you emphasized more from a people perspective, whether they are emotional, rational, and unpredictable. This is what the theme I started during the start of this session. So, but they are more important as the data strategy. But in an era where AI and automation are rapidly evolving, how do we ensure AI remains as an assistant rather than becoming the boss of our own decision making?
That's a great point. I mean, the thing about AI, especially generative AI, is that we know that generative AI can still be hallucinating and doing things that are not really correct, right? And the only way to identify and verify if it's correct or not is by us having the right expertise. And if you're not able to verify if the results of Gen AI is correct or not, then you probably shouldn't use it, right? Because otherwise, there's a danger of doing something completely wrong because you were not able to identify that it's completely off. So in that way, human in the loop or human judgment of what is right or wrong will always be above what AI is doing. So, and that I hope means also that we still see AI as just a tool, right? And we cannot let a tool take over our decision making. We can only use the tool to derive decisions from it and make us better confident and more informed about certain decisions we want to make. On another note, though, right? I mean, I feel like with AI nowadays, we can automate a lot of the tedious and manual operative things, right? Like, say, in data strategy, data governance, writing a policy, and you let generative AI write a first draft of a policy, so you only have to adapt the details, right? Or classifying data for you and data profiling, right? So you don't have to manually tag it anymore. There's a lot of things where I can help you already. And you can then, as a human being, focus more on critical thinking and decision making and don't have to do the manual tedious work as much. And that might be a good balance, right? So you're not actually letting AI be your boss. You're using AI as the tool that is the most effective for the task you're doing, but you can then focus more on the critical thinking yourself.
That's great. So yeah, because I do look at in terms of how generative AI can make the data strategy much more in terms of compliance, automation, and stuff. Connected to that, maybe this is so I know you mentioned about technical expertise doesn't always make a great leader, but so should a data strategy be owned by the CDO or the CAO or the CEO or a mysterious chief human officer who keeps AI in the check? What do you think?
That's a good question. I love a chief human officer, as if we didn't have one before. Because
Yeah,
isn't there usually a leader for HR? No, but you're right. Yeah, it's a typical question, right? Where should we put data? Because data is always not completely business, not completely tech, and not completely anything else. But I would say wherever the most advocacy and sponsorship can come from is where data can sit, because then at least they have assured support and they have the advocacy from higher up to actually let you roll it down and do it for the rest of the organization too, right? And that also means that the leader who's sponsoring the data team is having higher affinity and higher literacy towards data than maybe the others, and that can really help to actually make it successful. In the end, I feel like if we even go for more decentralization, as I mentioned before, right, there really isn't a lot of left of a central data team anyway, right? There might be a center of excellence here and there, but most of the data experts might sit in business functions anyway. So you have much more of a dispersed kind of way of looking at it, and then we see it. And that happens a lot with HR business partners and finance business partners already, right? If you look at organizations, how they're structured, you have specific business partners on the HR and finance side for specific departments. You might have data business partners in the future, right? And that is a much better setup than just having that one central team that never be scalable enough.
That's a good point you made, the data business partner, because this is something which I am now started hearing frequently with some of the people when I do interactions, because that could be a more value added where the data side of the entire ecosystem stays with them because he knows and he bleeds on data. That's a
Yeah.
very good point. But still, the critical piece is like many organizations, they talk about data driven decision making, or maybe the client to be data driven, but as you highlight, the true value is like aligning from your book. I just take the three musketeers: people, process, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, they struggle with cultural resistance, bias, and lack of trust in the data. So, how do leaders truly humanize data strategy is still a question to make it like more an enabler rather than an enforcement tool. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, enabling and enforcing is basically carrot or stick, right? It feels a little bit like the typical conversation we have. If you want to incentivize rather than enforce and punish people for bad behavior, right? But it does come down to the culture, as you mentioned. But a culture, then again, is an amalgamation of different behaviors and different values that you have. But it needs to be driven top down and bottom up, right? You need to have the leaders being a role model for a specific culture, but you need also the bottom up to in the operational people to indicate good behavior to then be able to recognize it as a good behavior to be then driven across it all. And in that way, right, I feel like it's both. It's enabling and enforcing in a way. You cannot do only one of the other because you will always have different characters and different situations where you need actually to steer it in the other direction to not get things get too much out of hand. I always like to always say, if you really want to be successful, you need to set boundaries, right? Because anarchy itself, it doesn't actually allow anything to be channeled in one direction. You need to set the right boundaries culturally as well to then actually drive it in the same direction to then make it happen.
Very, very true. I completely agree with this. So, adding to that, so we are always biased by our own decisions. Some people go on based on instinct, some people look at data. But if you had to talk about biases existing right at every stage of the data journey, and if you look at the AI models which are trained on human decisions, so are we just saying that we are outsourcing our biases to machines, or is there a real way to fix this?
Yeah, you asked if we are outsourcing our bias, right? Is that the question?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you're right. I mean, the thing is, right, exactly. If we let AI feed on past data, historical data, and we in the past were behaving not very well and we were heavily biased, then AI will learn the bias and they will amplify that bias too, right? And we as human beings have the unique uh, competence, right, and the skill that we change our moral compass. That over time we realize things that we did in the past have been wrong, and now we need to be better, right? That happened a lot now with slavery and torture in the past, right? Colonialism. Nowadays, it's more about DEI, right? Knowing that we were racist and we were not great to about diversity, for example, and we are getting better. But AI cannot know that, right? They don't have that same click to say now we actually know things are better. That was a human decision collectively that we made. So we need to actually, and we are responsible for basically anything we do to reflect our current moral compass and what we know is right or wrong. And we need to counter steer it if that means it, right? We have to then make sure that we actually don't let the data and AI amplify that bias, but amplify the right things about us and not the wrong things about us.
Okay. Great. So I have maybe another two or three to make it up. So you introduced this concept of data ikigai in your book, right? So aligning the data strategy with the purpose.
Yeah.
But if I were to be real, most people still see data as just numbers. So how do we actually make them care about it?
Yeah, I mean, so besides the data ikigai, which of course is a catchy and memorable framework, right? The requirement to even talk about that is that people know that data is valuable and that it actually can bring something. And if people are really that stubborn or that skeptical about data and they say data is not useful at all, I would usually talk to them on a personal level and ask them about how they manage their personal finances, right? Because the one thing we all have in common is that we all need to manage our personal finances, and that itself is a way of data management end to end, right? The data is created by our banks. We then take the data, we analyze it, and we make decisions based on it, right? And which is a very typical use case for data that we can apply also on organizational level. And once people get how they are managing data in their day-to-day personally, they cannot deny that it's also important to do it on an organizational level, right? And then you can start talking about, well, now think about, should you use data for everything that you talk about? Should you collect maybe all of the data about your friends' personal data and then basically rank them by the demographics? Is that the right thing to do, right? Or shouldn't you? And so once you can take it on a personal level and let them understand on those examples, then I feel like they usually get what it means on organizational level.
Very true. So it comes from the basic understanding of like, you learn from you and then use the data. So that is how it just triples down from top to bottom as what you think. So um, if you had to bet on one game-changing shift in the data strategy, let's say by 2030, what would it be? And will AI, human collaboration, define the future, or is there something bigger coming? What is your thoughts on it?
No, absolutely. I think AI, even if I'm skeptical about the hype, but it's here to stay and it's going to get more and more, right? And I do hope that we get from the a little bit overhyped aspect of it now to actually a more realistic approach of using it more. But I see so many opportunities there too, right? So again, right, if we can let AI agents, for example, start doing more of the operational things for us, um, then we can really focus more on the human thinking and the more critical decision making. I mean, I see examples of people using Copilot to create Power BI dashboards now, right? They use data profiling tools to manage data quality rules. They use AI, Gen AI, to create business glossaries. There's so many things that you can now do in a much easier way that isn't possible before. And I think that will get more and more. I think the best practices of data management then become best practices of data and AI management as well. And the world of data and AI will kind of collide a little bit more. So yeah, I definitely see that by 2030, a lot of things will probably have happened. And we will probably have had a lot of hypes and highs and lows actually on that technology aspect. But what I do hope is that we can all focus on still being experts, but then being better critical thinkers than just doers.
Yeah, that's nice. So just to add to that, what you mentioned about that could be AI agents. So recently, I did write an article on how data management from a overall perspective, where compliance is handled by an agent, data quality being handled by another agent, then you have a centralized AI pod which manages the overall task like an orchestrator and then delivering the results. I believe there
Right.
is a lot more interesting stuff coming in as we are moving in this era. So with that in the last note, this is the final question, followed by a little of a fire chat, which you love it. So I know you ended this in your book with this message: technology should support and not replace humanity, right? So if you had to leave a piece of an advice for data professionals and leaders navigating the AI era, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my advice would be that we data is never completely objective because there's always a subjective element in it, because it starts already being subjective the moment how we decide how data is collected. And if we all understand that data is always subjective no matter what, we also will pay attention to other people's opinions, because right and wrong is always relative when it comes to data. You just need to find the consensus and find the common ground there. So rather to aim for convincing everyone that you are right and everyone else is wrong, try to understand others and find common ground and understanding data. And that will probably make you a much better collaborator and a much better data leader.
Excellent. So common ground has always been the critical one where one doesn't accept the other. So really, really completely aligned with what you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a lot more insights. So I believe we are at the last few minutes of our conversation. So I thought let me have this a quick fireside chat on to make people a little more enlightened. So you also feel a little quicker. So should we start this?
Sure.
So it's going to be an yes or no or one word, and finally a few sentences, right? So question number one. So data-driven or a human-driven, which is more important?
Human-driven.
Yeah, I know that's going to be the answer, but yeah.
Yeah,
If you
that
could
was
arrange,
that was a biased answer of me, but yeah, you know why.
absolutely, absolutely. So if you could erase one data buzzword from the industry forever, what would it be?
Data democratization, I think, because I still don't completely know what it means. Like I know
Okay.
I get the concept behind it, but it's hard to grasp it, right? When is it democratized? Like, how would you even define it? And that has always been a thing for me. Like, I get it that you want to bring it to everyone, but democratizing, you know.
Still, it's open book, so we're all there to learn all over whatever we do as we progress.
Right.
Yeah. So, what's the most ridiculous excuse you have heard for not using data in decision making? Probably it looks more ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the most weird reason I've heard is I'm too lazy to click on the link to open the dashboard, was one thing I heard once. And it was so stupid because everyone put a lot of efforts in it to make that dashboard accessible and usable and sending it as a link to the stakeholder. And that person was still too lazy just to open that email and click on it and made a decision just without it. That was unacceptable.
That also looks like bad. Good. So, the best leadership advice you have ever received, maybe one sentence.
Best leadership advice. Yeah, I think there was one quote my mentor once told me. People will forget what you said or did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. That's from Maya Angelou, a great legendary person too, right? But it made me realize that we all often get stuck in the day to day, but in the end, it's the human connections that really count, right? In the end, you leave an impression as how you made others feel, not by the words, what you said, or how you actually, what you did. There's so much work always there. I don't remember what I did now 10 years ago, right? So it's more about I remember people and how they made me feel. And that is the impact we want to leave on others. So if you want to be a great leader, right, focus on the interactions, focus on the connections, and that's the most important part.
Excellent, because this is what we preach in our customer experience side of the business. So, what you make them feel is what the long lasting.
Exactly.
So the one book besides yours that every data leader should read, what would it be?
Yeah, I have an interesting one actually for that one. It's called Algorithms to Live By, and it's not necessarily a data book, I would say, but it is a book about the science behind our day-to-day decisions and how we have more to do with algorithms in day-to-day than we think. It's a really, really nice book. Everyone should check it out. But it actually showed me how decision-making, data-driven decision-making is all around us and how we just need to see them. And that has been really basically mind-blowing and eye-opening for me.
Oh, that's nice. I really would like to look at it, right? So the last one,
Yeah.
if you had a 30 seconds to pitch a humanizing AI movement, what would you say?
20 seconds to pitch humanizing AI, you said?
Yes,
Okay.
20 to 30 seconds, humanizing AI movement.
Yeah. I would say if we don't humanize AI, then who is making sure that AI is doing the right thing, right? And for AI to do the right things, we need to apply our human moral compass and our critical judgment to make sure it works. So human and I can have to coexist, and must ensure that we are dealing with it with respect.
Yeah. Yeah. So I believe that was really fun, as well as we had lots of data and insights to digest by ourselves. And you did share some of the valuable inputs. I'm really pleasure to have you as one of the guest of honor for today, and also being the first one to be part of this thought mesh where I propagate to deliver value to the entire community. So thank you so much, Tiankai, for your kind time. And if you have any last words, please do so.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thanks again for having me. Everyone who is interested in talking with me, reach out via LinkedIn. You can also check in my music videos on YouTube. And also, of course, don't forget to check out my book, Humanizing Data Strategy. It's on Amazon and wherever you get your books. So yeah, happy for anyone to reach out.
Thank you, Tiankai. It was a pleasure having you hosting today, and we'll all hope to hear from you more. I know we have subscribed to your YouTube channel, and we get to hear lots of songs there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So today, it's been a fantastic day. So I would love to thank everyone for joining us this the Thought Mesh. I hope this conversation has sparked new thoughts and perspectives on how we can make data more human, more meaningful, and also more impactful. As always, the journey doesn't end here. Let's keep weaving ideas and inspiring minds wherever you go. If you find value in today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected. More insights, conversations, and excitement are on the way. Until next time, stay curious, stay purposeful, and keep making data better. Thank you so much.